Hello, I'm Vince Whiteford. Welcome to Chiltern's podcast on the Chancellor's recent budget statement. For months we'd been led up and down garden paths, with leaks, rumours and teasers designed to test the public's likely reaction to a host of tax-raising measures. All this noise was predicated on there being a black hole in the nation's finances that just had to be filled. That's what we were told last year, and it brought the job-destroying employers' national insurance rises. Combined with business rates and higher minimum wages, it laid low the hospitality sector. Inheritance tax on agricultural property, which caused despair in the farming community. The message from ministers before this budget was that last year's pain was just not enough. More tax was needed to fill a new black hole. So, we were all braced for agony. At the front of the queue for fiscal surgery were the wealthy and those who were not working people, except, of course, everyone who does not work and receives state benefits. Well, it could have been worse, but it could have been a lot better. Apparently there was no black hole. The Chancellor just wanted headroom. The Office of Budget Responsibility told her months ago that she already had some. No tax rises were needed. But she and her acolytes carried on letting us all believe the myth. Suitably braced, we were a soft target for more tax. Whether the Chancellor and her leaked and misrepresented budget will get past the House remains to be seen. In the meantime, we need to digest some of the nasty holes which have been dug for us. Let's start with the measure that dominated the pre-budget chatter, the so-called mansion tax. What emerged was not the sweeping annual levy some feared, but a narrow surcharge on council tax for properties valued over £2 million, running from £2,500 a year for homes up to £2.5 million, then jumping to £3,500 up to £3.5 million, then £5,000 up to £5 million, then £7,500 above that. At the upper end, that's 0.15% of value. Modest, but enough to raise an eyebrow. What is highly undesirable, though, is that this is a cliff edge tax. It will distort house prices around the thresholds. Pay £1 more for a house and it costs you £2,500 a year. This will of course necessitate revaluations of the 1991 house prices still underpinning council tax bands today. One can only imagine the ripple effects when those assessments filter through to the wider housing stock. Imagine the arguments raging for houses valued around the thresholds. Not to mention the effect on house prices. The distortion stamp duty has caused are set to get worse. Is this the non-event or the new poll tax? Who knows what the ramifications will be for council tax itself? It feels very much like the thin end of a very thick wedge. Stamp duty began as a trivial charge of 0.5% on property transactions, only for successive governments to wield it as a policy instrument, first to harvest revenue, then to penalise landlords and second homeowners. The unintended consequence? A formidable barrier to entry in the housing market and a brake on mobility for those who might otherwise relocate for work or family reasons. This new mansion tax could follow a similar trajectory. Thresholds creeping lower, rates inching higher over time. Looking on the bright side, there had been whispers of a full wealth tax, perhaps kicking in at 5 million or 10 million of assets, capturing everything from property and share portfolios to watches and cars. Rates of 0.5% to 1%. Imagine the issues surrounding valuation of ever-changing assets every year. By comparison, this mansion tax will be simpler, not simple. and take much less from those perceived to have deep pockets. A small mercy, perhaps, in the grand scheme of things. There was a slightly better than last year's, that is, news from farmers. The new inheritance tax threshold of £1 million will now apply to each spouse and be transferable between them. That means a married couple can shield £2 million from inheritance tax. Not ideal, but a step up from last year's draconian rate. For those who live on dividends, savings interest, or property rentals, the message was blunt. Expect to pay 2% more income tax. We thought income tax wasn't rising. Then there's the blow to pension savers. Contributions by employees to build a retirement pot through salary sacrifice were capped at just £2,000 a year. This hits those who are, by definition, working people. We thought that taxes on working people were not rising, unless, of course, employees aren't working people. It's tempting to conclude that in the government's lexicon, working people are those without private pensions, without dividend-paying investments, without savings income, and certainly without rental properties. A remarkably narrow definition. Let's not, however, allow semantics to obscure a manifesto pledge. Another interesting swipe at workers is the decision to halve tax incentives for employee share schemes designed to foster broad ownership. The Chancellor's rationale? The schemes are costing more than expected. Why? Because the government underestimated their popularity. So, the wider objective was successful. A policy win, quietly diluted. On the housing front, one omission spoke volumes. On the basis that the absence of a positive can be a negative, the hoped-for cuts in stamp duty did not materialise. The barriers to climbing the housing ladder, or indeed to expanding the private rental stock, remain firmly in place. The government's target of 1.5 million new homes by the end of this Parliament looks far off. Finally, for the prudent, cautious saver, the annual ISA limit has been trimmed to £12,000 for the under 65s. This nudges the low-risk midlife saver towards the higher-risk stock market. That will pose an interesting challenge for their financial advisors, who must navigate suitability and risk profiling with even greater care. So, where does this leave us? Whilst painful, this filler of a non-existent black hole is probably not a decisive factor in looking at booking a one-way ticket to a tax haven. Unless, that is, you seek to escape not just from oppressive tax, but to a place where they speak a language different from our Chancellor's version of English. Perhaps the incipient British weather will tip the balance towards moving abroad. I hope you found this ramble through a rambling budget useful, and look forward to a reflective chat on what it means.